11 members of one family gather for Easter dinner in a quiet Ohio neighborhood, and by the end of the day, all of them are dead, shot by someone they trusted. The killer doesn't flee the scene or even deny what he's done. Instead, he sits among the bodies and waits.
After the slaughter, James Ruppert changed his clothes and called the cops. He was charged and tried for 11 murders. His attorneys said he killed during a psychotic rage. They said he was insane.
What drove a 41-year-old man to annihilate his entire family on the most sacred day of the Christian calendar remains one of the most chilling questions in American criminal history.
Prosecutor Holcomb detailed another motive.
He murdered his family to collect his brother's $300,000 or so in life insurance. That's what I think. It's what I think the evidence showed, and that's what I believe.
In his first trial here in Butler County, Ruppert was found guilty of all 11 murders. But he got a new trial because of some misinformation he got from a judge. In his second trial in a different county, a jury decided he was sane during 2 of the murders and insane during all the rest.
March 30th, 1975, Hamilton, Ohio. A modest 2-story house at 635 Minor Avenue sits on a tree-lined street where neighbors know each other's names and children play on front lawns. Inside that house, Charity Ruppert prepares for her family's Easter celebration. She's 65 years old, a devoted mother and grandmother who takes pride in hosting holiday gatherings. Her son Leonard Jr. will arrive soon with his wife Alma and their 8 children. It's a tradition they've maintained for years, Easter dinner at Grandma's house, where the smell of ham fills the kitchen and children hunt for colored eggs in the backyard. But Charity isn't alone in the house. Her other son, James Urban Ruppert, lives here too. He's 41, unemployed, and increasingly bitter about the direction his life has taken. While his younger brother Leonard built a successful career and raised a large family, James has watched his own dreams crumble into disappointment and failure. He drinks heavily, he collects guns, and on this particular Easter Sunday, something inside him finally breaks. By the time police arrive at 635 Minor Avenue, they will encounter a scene so horrific that veteran officers will struggle to maintain their composure. The worst mass murder by a single person in Ohio history unfolds in less than 5 minutes. 11 people, spanning 3 generations, are gone. The killer remains in the house, calm and cooperative, offering a confession that will haunt investigators for decades. This is the story of the Easter Sunday Massacre. Leonard Ruppert Jr. represents everything a man in 1975 America is supposed to be. At 42 years old, he works as an engineer for General Electric, providing a stable income for his wife and 8 children. He drives a Volkswagen van to accommodate his large family. He coaches his son's baseball teams. He attends church regularly. By all accounts, Leonard is a devoted father who takes pride in his children's accomplishments and works hard to give them opportunities he never had growing up during the Great Depression. His wife, Alma, is 38 years old and dedicates her life to managing their busy household. 8 children require constant attention, and Alma handles the logistics with grace. She coordinates school schedules, prepares meals, attends parent-teacher conferences, and ensures the family maintains their close bond. Friends describe her as warm and patient, with a quick smile and a genuine interest in other people's lives. She loves hosting family gatherings and considers herself fortunate to have such a close relationship with her mother-in-law, Charity. The Ruppert children span 13 years in age, creating a lively household where older siblings help care for younger ones. Leonard III, at 17, stands on the cusp of adulthood. He's a junior at Hamilton High School, well liked by his peers, and considering his options for college. Michael, 16, shares his older brother's athletic interests and plays on the school basketball team. Thomas, 15, shows artistic talent and spends hours drawing and sketching. Carol, 13, is in 7th grade and dreams of becoming a teacher like her favorite instructor, Mrs. Patterson. Anne, at 12, loves reading and can often be found curled up with a book in quiet corners of the house. David, 11, is the family comedian, always quick with a joke or silly face to make his siblings laugh. Teresa, 9, adores her grandmother Charity and frequently asks to spend weekends at the house on Minor Avenue. And then there's John, just 4 years old, the baby of the family. He's energetic and curious, constantly asking why and exploring everything within reach. For Leonard Jr. and Alma, raising 8 children in the mid-1970s requires careful budgeting and sacrifice, but they consider themselves blessed. Their children are healthy, doing well in school, and growing into kind, decent human beings. What more could parents want? Charity Ruppert, the family matriarch, lives for moments like Easter Sunday. At 65, she's been widowed for over a decade, since her husband Leonard Sr. died in 1963. She raised 2 sons in the house at 635 Minor Avenue, and though her life hasn't been easy, she takes pride in Leonard Jr.'s success. Her 8 grandchildren bring her immense joy. She bakes cookies for them, slips them dollar bills when their parents aren't looking, and keeps their drawings and report cards in a special box in her bedroom. Charity is a devout woman who attends First Presbyterian Church every Sunday without fail. Her faith sustains her through difficult times, and she believes firmly in the importance of family. That's why she continues to allow her older son, James, to live with her despite his problems. He's unemployed, drinks too much, and seems unable to get his life together, but he's still her son. She worries about him constantly. What will happen to James when she's gone? Who will take care of him? Before we continue with what happened that Easter Sunday, hit that subscribe button if you want to see justice served in cases like this. And let me know in the comments, where are you watching from? The Ruppert family represents ordinary American life in 1975. They're not wealthy, but they're not struggling. They attend church, celebrate holidays together, and maintain the kind of close family bonds that many people aspire to create. Leonard Jr. and Alma's children attend public schools, play sports, and participate in normal childhood activities. Charity's house on Minor Avenue sits in a working-class neighborhood where people mow their lawns, wave to neighbors, and feel safe enough to leave their doors unlocked. But within this seemingly normal family exists a tension that most relatives and neighbors don't fully recognize. James Ruppert, Charity's older son, lives a vastly different life than his younger brother. While Leonard Jr. achieved the American dream, James watches from the sidelines, bitter and resentful. The contrast between the 2 brothers becomes especially stark during family gatherings, when Leonard arrives with his large, happy family, while James sits alone, drinking, contributing nothing to the celebration. Charity tries to bridge the gap between her sons. She defends James when Leonard expresses frustration with his brother's lack of ambition. She makes excuses for James's drinking and unemployment. She invites James to join family gatherings, hoping he'll connect with his nephews and nieces. But the tension simmers beneath the surface of every holiday meal, every birthday party, every family event where the 2 brothers occupy the same space. Leonard Jr. loves his mother, but he's losing patience with his brother. He's suggested multiple times that Charity should push James harder to find work, to stop drinking, to take responsibility for his life. Leonard doesn't understand why a grown man would live with his mother, contribute nothing financially, and spend his days drinking and cleaning his extensive gun collection. It frustrates Leonard that his mother enables James's behavior instead of demanding he change. Still, family is family. Despite the underlying tensions, the Ruppert family maintains their traditions. Easter Sunday, 1975, is supposed to be like any other holiday gathering. Ham, potatoes, vegetables, rolls, and Charity's famous coconut cake. The children will hunt for eggs. The adults will catch up on each other's lives. Everyone will go home full and happy, already looking forward to the next celebration. That's what should happen. That's not what happens. James Urban Ruppert enters the world on August 29, 1934, in Hamilton, Ohio. He's the first son of Leonard Sr. and Charity Ruppert, and for his early years, he's the center of their attention. But But 3 years later, Leonard Jr. arrives, and the family dynamic shifts in ways that will haunt James for the rest of his life. From early childhood, James believes his parents favor his younger brother. Whether this perception reflects reality or exists only in James's mind becomes irrelevant. He believes it, and that belief shapes his entire personality. He watches his father spend time with Leonard Jr., teaching him things, praising his accomplishments, showing affection. James feels invisible by comparison. The resentment takes root early and grows deeper with each passing year. In school, James performs adequately but never excels. He's intelligent enough, but he lacks the drive and focus to stand out academically or socially. He makes few friends and struggles to connect with his peers. While Leonard Jr. navigates childhood with relative ease, making friends and participating in activities, James remains on the periphery, watching, comparing, and feeling inferior. The death of Leonard Ruppert Sr. in 1963 devastates the family, but it hits James particularly hard. He's 29 years old when his father dies, still living at home, still unmarried, still searching for direction in his life. With his father gone, James's relationship with his mother becomes increasingly complicated. Charity depends on him for certain tasks around the house, but she also constantly compares him unfavorably to Leonard Jr. At least, that's how James perceives their interactions. By the early 1970s, James's life becomes a study in failure and disappointment. He works sporadically as a draftsman, but he can't hold jobs for long. Employers find him difficult to work with. He's argumentative, defensive, and quick to perceive slights where none exist. He blames others for his professional failures, never acknowledging his own role in his unemployment. His romantic life is non-existent. James never marries, never has a serious girlfriend, never forms lasting intimate connections with anyone. He's awkward around women, socially inept, and increasingly bitter about his loneliness. He watches his younger brother build a family, have children, create the kind of life James desperately wants but cannot achieve. The contrast between the brothers' lives becomes more painful with each passing year. James develops a serious drinking problem. He consumes alcohol daily, starting earlier and earlier as the years progress. The drinking doesn't make him happy. It just numbs the constant anger and resentment that consume him. When he drinks, his thoughts turn dark. He replays perceived slights and injustices. He imagines confrontations where he finally tells his family what he really thinks of them. He fantasizes about revenge. He also collects guns. Lots of guns. By 1975, James owns multiple rifles, revolvers, and pistols, along with substantial ammunition. He keeps them meticulously clean, spending hours disassembling, cleaning, and reassembling his weapons. For James, the guns represent power and control in a life where he feels powerless and controlled by everyone else. When he holds a gun, he feels capable. He feels strong. He feels like someone who matters. His financial situation deteriorates steadily throughout the early 1970s. Without regular employment, James burns through what little savings he has. He owes money to various creditors. His car is failing. He has no prospects for improvement. And every time he sees his brother Leonard pull up in that Volkswagen van with 8 happy children, James feels the gap between their lives like a physical wound. The relationship between the brothers sours completely by 1975. They barely speak to each other during family gatherings. Leonard makes no effort to hide his disdain for James's lifestyle. He questions why a 41-year-old man lives with his mother. He criticizes James's drinking. He suggests, not subtly, that James is a burden on charity and needs to get his life together. Leonard means well. He genuinely wants his brother to succeed. But James doesn't perceive his brother's comments as concern. He perceives them as attacks. Charity finds herself caught between her 2 sons. She loves them both, but she can see how different they are. Leonard is everything a mother hopes her son will become: successful, responsible, a devoted father. James is everything a mother worries about. Unemployed, alcoholic, directionless. She tries to encourage James, but her encouragement often comes across as nagging. She compares him to Leonard, asking why he can't be more like his brother. She threatens to kick him out of the house if he doesn't find work. These threats are empty. She never follows through, but they deepen James's resentment. In the weeks leading up to Easter 1975, James's mental state deteriorates noticeably. He drinks more heavily than usual. He spends long hours alone in his room with his guns. He mutters to himself. Neighbors occasionally hear him shouting inside the house, though they can't make out the words. Something is building inside James Ruppert, a pressure that increases daily, a rage that seeks an outlet. Later, psychiatrists will debate whether James is insane or simply evil. They'll analyze his childhood, his relationships, his perceived grievances. They'll try to understand what transforms resentment into mass murder. But in March 1975, no one fully grasps how dangerous James has become. His family knows he's troubled, but they don't know he's homicidal. His mother worries about him, but she doesn't fear him. His brother dismisses him as a loser, but doesn't see him as a threat. They should. On the morning of Easter Sunday, March 30th, 1975, James Urban Ruppert wakes up in his bedroom at 635 Minor Avenue. Downstairs, his mother Charity prepares for the family gathering. Leonard Jr., Alma, and the 8 children will arrive soon. James knows the routine, the forced pleasantries, the awkward conversations, the unspoken comparisons between his life and Leonard's. He's participated in dozens of these gatherings over the years, each one reinforcing his sense of failure and inadequacy. But this Easter will be different. James has made a decision. He's tired of being the family disappointment. He's tired of his mother's nagging and his brother's judgment. He's tired of watching Leonard's perfect family while he remains alone and unsuccessful. He's tired of everything. He begins selecting weapons from his collection. The morning of March 30th, 1975, dawns cool and cloudy in Hamilton, Ohio. Charity Ruppert rises early to begin preparing Easter dinner. She moves through her kitchen with practiced efficiency, seasoning the ham, peeling potatoes, setting the table for her expected guests. Upstairs, James remains in his room, silent. Charity is accustomed to his moods and doesn't disturb him. She assumes he'll join the family later, or perhaps he won't. She's learned not to push him on holidays. Around noon, Leonard Jr. loads his family into their Volkswagen van for the short drive to 635 Minor Avenue. The children are excited. Easter at Grandma's house means good food, egg hunts, and time with their grandmother who spoils them shamelessly. Alma has dressed the younger children in their Easter clothes, though she knows they'll be rumpled and stained by the end of the day. Leonard Jr. is in a good mood. Work is going well, the family is healthy, and he's grateful for these moments when 3 generations gather under one roof. They arrive at Charity's house around 1:30 p.m. The children pour out of the van, racing to the front door, calling for their grandmother. Charity greets them with hugs and kisses, exclaiming how much they've grown since she last saw them. Leonard Jr. and Alma follow with the dishes Alma prepared to contribute to the meal. The house fills with noise and life, children laughing, adults talking, the sounds of a family celebration. James remains upstairs in his room. The afternoon progresses normally. The children hunt for eggs in the backyard. The adults sit in the living room, discussing work, school, upcoming plans. Charity moves between the kitchen and living room, checking on food, refilling drinks, ensuring everyone has what they need. No one mentions James's absence. It's easier when he's not there anyway. No uncomfortable silences, no tension, no judgment. But James is there. He's in his room drinking. He's been drinking since morning, working up his courage, silencing his doubts, feeding his rage. The sounds of his brother's happy family drift up through the floorboards. Children laughing, adults chatting, the normal sounds of a normal family celebration. Each sound stokes James's anger. They're down there enjoying themselves while he sits alone, excluded, forgotten. Except he's not forgotten. Around 4 p.m, Charity calls upstairs, inviting James to join them for dinner. Her voice is cheerful, inviting. She's trying to include him, to make him feel part of the family. James hears her call as criticism, as mockery. He imagines walking downstairs to face Leonard's judgment and pity. He imagines sitting at the table while his perfect brother's perfect family enjoys their perfect life. He's done imagining. James picks up his weapons. He's chosen 3 firearms, a .357 Magnum revolver, a .38 caliber revolver, and a .22 caliber rifle. He loads them carefully, his hands steady despite the alcohol in his system. He's cleaned these guns hundreds of times. He knows them intimately. He checks the ammunition one final time. Then he walks downstairs. The family is in the living room and dining area. Leonard Jr. sits on the couch. Alma is nearby. The children are scattered throughout the space, some sitting, some standing, some playing. Charity is in the kitchen, putting final touches on the meal. It's a scene of domestic normalcy, a snapshot of family life that exists in millions of American homes on this Easter Sunday. James enters the room with his guns. What happens next takes less than 5 minutes. James begins firing. He shoots his brother Leonard first, multiple times, ensuring he's dead before moving to the next target. Alma screams. The children scatter in terror, but there's nowhere to go. The house that moments ago felt warm and welcoming becomes a trap. James moves methodically from room to room, hunting down family members who try to hide. He shows no hesitation, no mercy, no emotion. He reloads when necessary and continues firing. Charity hears the gunshots and rushes from the kitchen. She sees her son with the guns, sees bodies on the floor, sees her grandchildren running in terror. She understands immediately what's happening, though her mind struggles to accept it. She begs James to stop. She screams at him. She moves toward him, perhaps hoping to grab the weapons, perhaps simply reacting on maternal instinct to protect her grandchildren. James shoots his mother. The children try everything to survive. Some hide under beds. Some lock themselves in bathrooms. Some simply freeze in terror, unable to process what's happening. 4-year-old John probably doesn't understand at all. He just knows there's loud noises and people are screaming, and he's frightened. 17-year-old Leonard III understands perfectly, and his last moments are filled with the knowledge that his uncle is murdering his entire family. James hunts them all down. He shoots through doors. He finds them under beds. He fires until each family member stops moving. 11 people, 11 victims. His mother, his brother, his sister-in-law, and 8 children ranging in age from 4 to 17. By approximately 4:15 p.m., the shooting stops. The house falls silent except for James's breathing and the ringing in his ears from the gunfire. He walks through the rooms looking at what he's done. Bodies lie where they fell. Blood soaks into carpets and furniture. The Easter dinner Charity prepared sits forgotten on the kitchen counter, steam still rising from the dishes. James sets down his weapons. He finds a bottle and continues drinking. He doesn't flee. He doesn't call for help. He simply sits in the house, surrounded by the bodies of his family, and waits. Hours pass. Outside, neighbors heard the shots, but assumed they were firecrackers or a car backfiring. It's Easter Sunday in a quiet neighborhood. Who expects a massacre? No one calls the police. No one investigates. The house at 635 Minor Avenue sits quiet and still, while the bodies of 11 people grow cold inside. People like James Ruppert count on silence to cover their evil. Show them your voice stands for justice. Type "Justice for the Ruppert family" in the comments and hit that like button. James sits among the dead for hours, drinking, waiting, perhaps wondering what happens next. He's accomplished what he set out to do. His brother will never judge him again. His mother will never nag him again. Those 8 children will never serve as reminders of what James failed to achieve in his own life. He solved his problem the only way his diseased mind could conceive, But now he faces a different problem. 11 bodies lie around him, and eventually someone will discover them. Eventually, he'll have to face the consequences of what he's done. As the evening wears on and the reality of his situation settles in, James makes a decision. Around 8:02 p.m., approximately 4 hours after the shooting stopped, James Urban Ruppert picks up the telephone and calls the Hamilton Police Department. His voice is calm when the dispatcher answers. "There's been a shooting," he says. "You'd better come to 635 Minor Avenue." The dispatcher at Hamilton Police Department receives James's call at 8:05 p.m. The man on the phone sounds eerily calm, almost detached. He reports a shooting at 635 Minor Avenue, but provides few details. When the dispatcher asks if anyone is injured, James responds vaguely. When asked if the shooter is still on the scene, James doesn't answer directly. The dispatcher, trained to recognize unusual caller behavior, immediately flags the call as high priority and dispatches multiple units to the address. Officers arrive at 635 Minor Avenue within minutes. The house looks normal from the outside. Lights on, no signs of disturbance, a Volkswagen van parked in the driveway. Officer Larry Bray and Sergeant Michael Schultz approach the front door cautiously, unsure what they'll find. They knock and announce themselves. James Urban Ruppert opens the door. He's calm, cooperative, and clearly intoxicated. He steps aside and invites the officers into the house. "They're in there," he says, gesturing toward the living room and dining area. Officers Bray and Schultz enter the house and immediately encounter a scene beyond anything in their experience or training. Bodies everywhere, an adult male on the couch, multiple gunshot wounds. A woman nearby, also shot multiple times. Children's bodies in various rooms, some on the floor, some on furniture, one in a bathroom, others in bedrooms. Blood covers floors, walls, and furniture. Shell casings litter the carpet. The smell of gunpowder still hangs in the air, mixed with the copper scent of blood. Officer Bray, a veteran with 12 years on the force, steps back outside and radios for assistance. His voice shakes when he reports what he's found. "We need every available unit at 635 Minor Avenue. We've got multiple victims, multiple fatalities. We need detectives, medical examiner, everyone." Sergeant Schultz remains inside with James, who sits calmly at the kitchen table. Schultz's training kicks in. Secure the scene, control the suspect, preserve evidence. He asks James if there's anyone else in the house. James says no, just the bodies. Schultz asks if James did the shooting. James nods. Schultz places James in handcuffs and reads him his Miranda rights. "Do you understand these rights as I've explained them to you?" Schultz asks. "Yes," James responds. "Do you wish to speak with me?" "Yes, I killed them all 11 of them." Within 30 minutes, 635 Minor Avenue transforms into a massive crime scene. Police cars line the street, their lights flashing red and blue in the growing darkness. Officers establish a perimeter, keeping curious neighbors away from the house. Detectives from the Hamilton Police Department arrive, followed by the Butler County Sheriff's Office, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and the county medical examiner. Lieutenant Wayne Borman, head of the detective division, enters the house and begins documenting the scene. He's a 25-year veteran who has worked hundreds of homicides, but nothing prepares him for this. 11 victims, a family, killed in their own home on Easter Sunday. He forces himself to focus on the work, photograph the scene, document the evidence, identify the victims, reconstruct what happened. The victims are identified quickly through documents found in the house and statements from James. Charity Ruppert, age 65, found in the living room, shot twice. Leonard Ruppert Jr., age 42, found on the couch, shot 4 times. Alma Ruppert, age 38, found near the dining area, shot 3 times. The children, Leonard III, 17, shot twice. Michael, 16, shot 3 times. Thomas, 15, shot twice. Carol, 13, shot twice. Anne, 12, shot 3 times. David, 11, shot twice. Teresa, 9, shot twice. John, 4, shot once. 41 shots fired, 11 victims, 3 weapons, 1 killer. Medical examiner. Dr. Harry Sanford arrives at the scene around 9:30 p.m. He examines each body in place before authorizing their removal to the county morgue. He determines that all 11 victims died from gunshot wounds, most shot multiple times. The children's bodies particularly affect him. He has grandchildren their ages. He completes his preliminary examination and orders the bodies transported for full autopsies. Meanwhile, Detective Richard Misa takes charge of interrogating James at the Hamilton Police Department. James is placed in an interview room, still handcuffed, still calm. Misa has interrogated hundreds of suspects, but he's never sat across from someone who killed 11 people. He begins with basic questions: name, age, address, employment status. Then he asks the critical question: James, did you shoot those people in the house at 635 Minor Avenue? Yes, James responds immediately. I shot them all. Why did you do it? James's answer will be debated for years. I just couldn't take it anymore. My brother and my mother, they never stopped. They were always on me, always judging me, always comparing me to Leonard. I just snapped. When did you decide to do this? I don't know. This morning, I guess. Maybe earlier, I'm not sure. Did you plan this? I suppose I did. I got the guns ready. I waited for them to arrive. So yes, I planned it. The interrogation continues for hours. James provides details about the shooting, what weapons he used, the order in which he shot his family members, what he did afterward. He shows no remorse, no emotion, no understanding of the magnitude of what he's done. He speaks about murdering 11 people the way someone might describe a routine task. Detective Mise asks about the children. James, those kids ranged from 4 to 17 years old. Why did you kill the children? James shrugs. They were Leonard's kids. They were part of it. Part of what? Part of his perfect life, his perfect family, everything I didn't have. The confession is recorded, documented, and signed. James Ruppert provides a full admission to 11 counts of murder. There will be no mystery about who committed this crime, no lengthy investigation to identify the killer. James confesses freely, describes his actions clearly, and accepts responsibility for killing his entire family. He's formally charged with 11 counts of aggravated murder and held without bond at the Butler County Jail. News of the massacre spreads quickly through Hamilton, then across Ohio, then nationwide. By morning, reporters from major newspapers and television networks descend on the quiet community. The Easter Sunday Massacre dominates headlines across America. In the house at 635 Minor Avenue, investigators work through the night documenting evidence. They photograph every room, collect every shell casing, diagram the position of every body. They bag James's 3 guns as evidence. They process a crime scene that spans multiple rooms and 11 victims. By dawn on March 31st, the bodies have been removed, the evidence collected, and the investigation shifts from scene processing to building a prosecution case. But questions remain, questions that will haunt this case for decades. Why did James really do it? Was he insane or just evil? Could anyone have prevented this tragedy? And how does someone kill 11 family members, including 8 children, without showing any remorse? Those questions will be explored in the months ahead as James Urban Ruppert faces trial for the worst mass murder in Ohio history. The morning of March 31st, 1975, dawns over a transformed Hamilton, Ohio. The quiet community that prided itself on safety and neighborliness now faces the reality that a man murdered 11 family members less than a mile from the town center. Reporters stake out the house at 635 Minor Avenue, interviewing neighbors who struggle to comprehend what happened. Police maintain a presence at the scene, though the bodies have been removed and most evidence has been collected. At the Butler County Morgue, Dr. Harry Sanford begins the grim task of performing 11 autopsies. He starts early, knowing the work will take days to complete properly. Each victim must be examined, photographed, and documented. Each bullet wound must be measured and described. Each bullet or bullet fragment must be recovered and catalogued as evidence. His findings confirm what investigators already know from the crime scene. Charity Ruppert was shot twice, once in the chest and once in the head. Leonard Ruppert Jr. sustained 4 gunshot wounds, including 2 to the head. Alma Ruppert was shot 3 times in the chest and abdomen. The children each sustained between 1 and 3 gunshot wounds, most to the head or chest. The autopsy reports reveal that James shot several victims multiple times, apparently to ensure they were dead. Dr. Sanford recovers bullets and bullet fragments from the bodies, preserving them for ballistic analysis. The weapons are already in police custody: the .357 Magnum revolver, the .38 caliber revolver, and the .22 caliber rifle. Forensic experts will match the recovered bullets to these specific weapons, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence linking James Ruppert to every death. The autopsies also establish approximate times of death, all clustering between 4:00 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. on March 30th. This timeline matches James's confession that the shooting lasted only a few minutes. Dr. Sanford finds no evidence that any victim survived for long after being shot. Most died within seconds or minutes of sustaining their wounds. At the Hamilton Police Department, investigators build their case file. Lead prosecutor John Holcomb reviews the evidence and recognizes he has an overwhelming case. James confessed. He was found at the scene with the murder weapons. 11 bodies provide irrefutable proof of the crime. Ballistic evidence will link the weapons to the victims. There are no questions about who committed this crime or how it was carried out. But Holcomb anticipates the obvious defense strategy. James's attorneys will argue insanity. They'll claim he suffered from mental illness that prevented him from understanding his actions or distinguishing right from wrong. The confession might actually support an insanity defense if James can be portrayed as someone so mentally disturbed that he killed 11 people without comprehending the enormity of his actions. This recognition shapes the investigation's focus. Prosecutors need to establish James's mental state before, during, and after the murders. They need to prove he planned the killings, understood what he was doing, and knew it was wrong. They need to demonstrate legal sanity, even if James suffered from mental health issues. Investigators interview James's former employers, seeking evidence of his mental state in the months before the massacre. They find a pattern of anger and resentment, but nothing suggesting psychosis or delusion. Former co-workers describe James as bitter and difficult, but not insane. He argued with supervisors, complained constantly about unfair treatment, and blamed others for his failures. But these behaviors suggest personality issues, not mental illness. Police interview neighbors from Minor Avenue. Several recall seeing James in the days before Easter, working on his car, drinking on the front porch, maintaining the exterior appearance of normalcy. One neighbor, Patricia Wheeler, reports that James seemed angrier than usual in the week before Easter, muttering to himself and drinking heavily even by his standards. But again, these observations suggest emotional distress, not insanity. Before we get to the trial that divided the community, share this video with someone who follows true crime. Stories like the Ruppert families need to be heard. Also, drop a comment. What's the weather like where you are? Investigators reconstruct James's financial situation, finding mounting debts and no income. His bank account is nearly empty. He owes money to several creditors. His car needs repairs he can't afford. His mother has threatened to evict him if he doesn't find work. The financial pressure provides additional motive. James faces the humiliation of homelessness and bankruptcy, while his successful brother lives comfortably with his large family. The investigation expands to James's gun collection and purchase history. Records show he legally purchased multiple firearms over several years, maintaining permits and licenses. He bought ammunition regularly and kept detailed records of his purchases. This documentation contradicts any claim that James acted on impulsive insanity. He maintained organized records, followed legal procedures, and demonstrated ongoing capability to manage practical affairs. Detectives searched James's bedroom at 635 Minor Avenue thoroughly. They find extensive gun cleaning supplies, ammunition organized by caliber, and documents related to his firearms. They also discover financial records, correspondence, and personal items that paint a picture of James's life. One notebook contains pages of angry writing about his brother and mother, cataloguing perceived slights and injustices. The writing is coherent and organized, not the disorganized ramblings of someone experiencing psychosis. The prosecution's case strengthens with each piece of evidence. James planned the murders, selected weapons, waited for his family to arrive, executed his plan, and then calmly called police. This sequence suggests premeditation and understanding, not insanity. But the defense team, led by attorney Hugh Holbrook, develops their own strategy. They hire psychiatric experts to evaluate James and determine if he meets Ohio's legal definition of insanity. In 1975, Ohio follows the Manhattan Rule, which requires proving the defendant either didn't know what he was doing or didn't know it was wrong. It's a high bar for the defense to clear, but it's their only viable strategy given the overwhelming evidence of James's guilt. Dr. Clarence Knopfler, a psychiatrist hired by the defense, conducts extensive evaluations of James at the Butler County Jail. He administers psychological tests, conducts multiple interviews, and reviews James's history. His findings present a complex picture. James shows signs of personality disorders, chronic alcoholism, and possible depression. He demonstrates classic symptoms of narcissistic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder. He harbors deep-seated resentments and an external locus of control, always blaming others for his failures. But does he meet the legal definition of insanity? Dr. Knopfler struggles with this question. James clearly knew what he was doing when he shot his family. He selected weapons, loaded them, aimed them, and fired them intentionally. He knew his family members would die as a result. He called police afterward, demonstrating awareness that he'd committed a crime. These facts argue against legal insanity. However, Dr. Knopfler considers whether James's mental illness was so severe that he couldn't conform his behavior to the law. Perhaps his personality disorders, combined with alcohol and mounting stress, created a psychological break that rendered him unable to resist his homicidal impulses. This theory might support an insanity defense if presented properly to a jury. The prosecution hires their own psychiatric experts who reach different conclusions. Dr. Richard Susu evaluates James and finds no evidence of legal insanity. Yes, James has personality problems and alcohol issues. Yes, he's resentful and bitter, but he understood his actions, knew they were wrong, and chose to commit murder anyway. Dr. Susu's report characterizes James as a narcissist who killed his family because they damaged his ego and made him feel inadequate. As the investigation progresses through spring and summer 1975, both sides prepare for trial. The prosecution has overwhelming evidence of guilt, but must counter the anticipated insanity defense. The defense must convince a jury that James's mental illness was so severe that he can't be held criminally responsible for 11 murders. The community of Hamilton watches the case develop with fascination and horror. Many residents knew the Ruppert family, shopped at the same stores, attended the same churches. The victims were buried in emotional funerals attended by hundreds of mourners. Leonard Jr., Alma, and their 8 children were interred together, the family united in death as they were in life. Charity Ruppert was buried beside her husband Leonard Sr., reunited after 12 years apart. The house at 635 Minor Avenue sits empty, a crime scene turned memorial. Flowers and notes accumulate on the front porch. Neighbors avoid walking past the house, uncomfortable with the memories of what happened inside those walls. Eventually, the property will be sold, cleaned, and occupied by new residents who may never know its dark history. But in the summer of 1975, it stands as a monument to one man's rage and 11 people's terror. James Urban Ruppert remains in the Butler County Jail, awaiting trial. He shows no remorse, expresses no regret, offers no apologies. When asked about the children he killed, he responds with chilling indifference. When confronted with photographs of his victims, he displays no emotional response. Guards observe him reading, sleeping, and eating normally. showing none of the behaviors associated with severe mental illness. The evidence against him is overwhelming. The psychiatric evaluations present competing interpretations of his mental state. The legal battle ahead will determine whether James Urban Ruppert is a cold-blooded murderer who deserves punishment, or a mentally ill man who can't be held responsible for his actions. One thing is certain: 11 innocent people are dead, killed by someone they trusted and loved. Whatever verdict emerges from the trial, nothing will bring them back or ease the pain of their deaths. The Easter Sunday Massacre has left scars on Hamilton, Ohio, that will never fully heal. The trial is scheduled to begin in the fall of 1975, and the nation watches to see how justice will be served in one of the most horrific mass murders in American history. On July 3rd, 1975, just 3 months after the Easter Sunday Massacre, James Urban Ruppert's first trial begins in Butler County Common Pleas Court. Judge Francis O'Neill presides over what promises to be one of the most closely watched criminal trials in Ohio history. Prosecutor John Holcomb represents the state of Ohio, seeking justice for 11 murdered victims. Defense attorney Hugh Holbrook faces the nearly impossible task of defending a client who confessed to killing his entire family. The courtroom is packed. Reporters fill the gallery, notebooks ready. Sketch artists position themselves for optimal views of the defendant. Family members of the victims attend, seeking some measure of closure, though nothing will truly ease their grief. James sits at the defense table, showing the same flat affect he's displayed since his arrest. He watches the proceedings with detached interest, as if observing someone else's trial. Jury selection takes several days. The defense and prosecution question potential jurors carefully, seeking people who can set aside the horrific nature of the crimes and fairly evaluate the insanity defense. The final jury consists of 7 women and 5 men, ranging in age from 23 to 67. They've all heard about the Easter Sunday Massacre, but they pledge to base their verdict solely on evidence presented in court. Prosecutor Holcomb delivers his opening statement with controlled passion. He describes the Easter gathering, the happy family celebrating together, and James's calculated decision to murder them all. This was not insanity, Holcomb tells the jury. This was revenge. James Ruppert resented his brother's success, his mother's criticism, and his own failures. He decided to solve his problems with bullets. He planned it, executed it, and then calmly called police. That's not insanity. That's premeditated murder. Defense attorney Holbrook presents a different narrative. James Ruppert is a deeply troubled man who suffered a complete mental breakdown. Years of depression, alcoholism, and untreated mental illness culminated in a psychotic break on Easter Sunday. He didn't know what he was doing. He couldn't distinguish right from wrong. He needs treatment, not punishment. The prosecution's case proceeds methodically. Detective Richard Misay testifies about James's confession, describing how calmly he admitted to killing 11 people. Medical examiner Dr. Harry Sanford presents autopsy findings, detailing the cause of death for each victim. The testimony is clinical and factual, but its impact on the jury is visible. Several jurors weep when Dr. Sanford describes the children's injuries. Ballistic experts testify that bullets recovered from the victims matched James's 3 weapons. Crime scene investigators present photographs and diagrams showing where each victim fell. The physical evidence is overwhelming and undisputed. James Urban Ruppert killed 11 people with 3 guns in less than 5 minutes. But the critical battle focuses on James's mental state. The prosecution calls Dr. Richard Susu, their psychiatric expert. Dr. Susu testifies that he evaluated James extensively and found no evidence of legal insanity. Mr. Ruppert has personality disorders and alcohol problems, Dr. Susu explains. But he knew what he was doing, knew it was wrong, and chose to do it anyway. He's a narcissist who couldn't tolerate his perceived failures, so he eliminated the people who reminded him of those failures. The defense counters with Dr. Clarence Knupfler, who presents a different interpretation. James Ruppert suffered from severe mental illness that rendered him unable to conform his behavior to the law. His personality disorders, combined with chronic alcoholism and mounting stress, created a psychotic break. At the moment he began shooting, he was not in control of his actions. The dueling psychiatric testimonies create confusion for the jury. Both experts examined the same man, reviewed the same history, and reached opposite conclusions. The jurors must decide which interpretation of James's mental state they find more credible. The defense makes a strategic decision not to put James on the stand. His flat affect and lack of remorse would likely alienate jurors rather than generate sympathy. Instead, the defense relies on expert testimony and character witnesses who describe James's deteriorating mental health in the months before Easter. The prosecution hammers at the evidence of premeditation. James selected 3 specific weapons from his collection. He loaded them before his family arrived. He waited for them to gather in the house. He systematically hunted down family members who tried to hide. He called police afterward. Each action demonstrates awareness and intent. After 8 days of testimony, both sides present closing arguments. Holcomb reminds the jury of the 11 victims, a grandmother, a mother, a father, and 8 children who trusted James and died because of that trust. Don't let him hide behind mental illness, Holcomb urges. He knew exactly what he was doing. Holbrook pleads for mercy based on mental illness. James Ruppert is sick. He's been sick for years. What happened on Easter Sunday was a tragedy born of untreated mental illness. He deserves treatment, not execution. The jury deliberates for 19 hours over 3 days. On July 23, 1975, they return with a verdict: guilty. Guilty on all 11 counts of aggravated murder. The jury rejects the insanity defense, finding that James understood his actions and knew they were wrong. The verdict brings relief to prosecutors and devastation to the defense team. James shows no visible reaction to the verdict, maintaining the same blank expression he's worn throughout the trial. The penalty phase begins immediately. In 1975, Ohio has the death penalty, and prosecutors seek it for James's crimes. The jury must decide whether to sentence him to death or life in prison. Arguments focus on aggravating and mitigating factors. Aggravating factors include the number of victims, the presence of children, and the premeditated nature of the crimes. Mitigating factors include James's mental health issues, lack of prior violent crimes, and potential for treatment. After additional deliberation, the jury returns with their sentencing recommendation: life imprisonment. While they found James legally sane, enough jurors harbor doubts about his mental health to spare him from execution. Judge O'Neill accepts the recommendation and sentences James Urban Ruppert to 11 consecutive life sentences, ensuring he will never walk free. But the case doesn't end there. The defense immediately appeals the conviction, arguing multiple errors in the trial process. They claim the judge improperly instructed the jury on the insanity defense. They argue that extensive pretrial publicity made a fair trial impossible in Butler County. They challenge the admission of certain evidence. The appeals process winds through Ohio's court system for 6 years. In 1981, an appellate court overturns James's conviction and orders a new trial. The court finds that Judge O'Neill's jury instructions on the insanity defense were inadequate, potentially confusing jurors about the legal standard they must apply. The second trial begins in July 1982, 7 years after the massacre. A new judge, Richard Niehaus, presides. The prosecution team remains largely the same, but the defense brings in new attorneys with fresh strategies. James is now 47 years old, having spent 7 years in prison awaiting this retrial. The second trial covers much of the same ground as the first, but with important differences. Both sides have refined their arguments based on lessons learned from the first trial. The defense presents additional psychiatric experts who testify about James's mental deterioration. The prosecution brings in new witnesses who describe James's behavior before the massacre, emphasizing his capability to function normally when he chose to. One new piece of evidence emerges. A letter James wrote to a friend 3 weeks before Easter, complaining about his family but making no mention of violent plans. The prosecution uses this letter to demonstrate that James was coherent and rational weeks before the massacre. The defense argues it shows mounting resentment that contributed to his eventual breakdown. The second jury deliberates for 4 days. They request clarification on the insanity defense multiple times, struggling with the same questions that challenged the first jury. On August 5, 1982, they return with their verdict: guilty. Once again, the jury rejects the insanity defense and convicts James on all 11 counts of aggravated murder. This time, however, the jury sentences him to death. Perhaps they're less sympathetic after seeing the evidence a second time, or perhaps the passage of 7 years has hardened their resolve. Judge Niehaus imposes the death sentence, and James is transferred to death row at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility. But James's legal battle continues. The death sentence triggers automatic appeals in the Ohio court system. Defense attorneys argue that the death penalty is inappropriate given James's mental health issues. They present new psychiatric evidence suggesting James suffered from undiagnosed schizophrenia at the time of the murders. The appeals process drags on for years. In 1987, the Ohio Supreme Court upholds James's conviction but vacates the death sentence, ruling that the trial court made errors in the penalty phase. The case returns to the trial court for resentencing. In 1988, 13 years after the Easter Sunday Massacre, James appears for his final sentencing hearing. Now 54 years old, he spent more than a decade in prison. Judge John Moser reviews the case and imposes a new sentence: 11 consecutive life sentences with eligibility for parole after serving substantial time on each count. This sentence effectively ensures James will die in prison, but it removes him from death row. The prosecution accepts this resolution, recognizing that endless appeals might delay justice indefinitely. The families of the victims express mixed feelings. Some wanted James executed, others simply want the legal proceedings to end so they can begin healing. James Urban Ruppert is transferred to the Allen Oakwood Correctional Institution in Lima, Ohio, where he remains today. He becomes eligible for parole hearings, but his applications are consistently denied. James's first parole hearing occurs in 1995, 20 years after the massacre. He appears before the Ohio Parole Board and shows no remorse for his crimes. When asked about the murders, he claims he doesn't remember the details. When asked if he feels sorry for the victims, he responds vaguely, never offering genuine apology or accepting responsibility. The parole board denies his application unanimously. Subsequent parole hearings in 2003, 2013, and 2022 follow similar patterns. James, now in his 80s, maintains that he doesn't remember killing his family. He attributes the murders to a blackout caused by alcohol and mental illness. He never expresses genuine remorse or acknowledges the magnitude of his crimes. Each parole hearing brings renewed pain to the surviving family members and the Hamilton community. Relatives of the victims submit statements opposing parole, reminding the board of the 11 lives James destroyed. The parole board consistently denies his applications, citing lack of remorse, the severity of the crimes, and the ongoing danger he poses to public safety. In July 2022, at age 87, James appears for his most recent parole hearing. He's frail and elderly, suffering from various health issues associated with aging. His attorneys argue that he poses no danger at his advanced age and should be granted compassionate release. The prosecution and victims' families vehemently oppose his release. The parole board denies the application again. James's next possible parole hearing is scheduled for 2025, when he'll be 90 years old if he's still alive. As of 2024, James Urban Ruppert remains incarcerated at the Allen Oakwood Correctional Institution. He's 90 years old, one of Ohio's oldest inmates, and one of the longest-serving prisoners in the state. He spent 49 years in prison for the Easter Sunday Massacre, outliving most of his victims by decades. Prison records indicate he's been a model inmate, avoiding disciplinary problems and participating in available programs. but his lack of remorse in parole hearings consistently works against him. Without genuine acceptance of responsibility and authentic remorse, the parole board sees no reason to release him. The house at 635 Minor Avenue no longer stands. It was eventually demolished, unable to escape its dark history. A new house stands on the property now, occupied by residents who may or may not know what happened there in 1975. The street looks like any other quiet residential area in Hamilton, giving no indication of the horror that unfolded there decades ago. The 11 victims of the Easter Sunday Massacre are buried in various cemeteries around Hamilton. Leonard Jr., Alma, and their 8 children rest together, their graves marked with a large family monument. Charity Ruppert lies beside her husband Leonard Sr., reunited in death. The community established a memorial fund in the victims' names, raising money for local charities and youth programs. Several of the Ruppert children's schools created scholarships in their memory. The tragedy prompted discussions about family violence, mental health services, and warning signs of potential mass violence. Some family members who survived, cousins, aunts, uncles of the victims, refused to speak publicly about the massacre. The pain remains too raw even decades later. Others have participated in documentaries and interviews, determined to keep the victims' memories alive and ensure they're remembered for how they lived, not just how they died. The Easter Sunday Massacre changed Hamilton forever. It shattered the community's sense of safety and innocence. It raised uncomfortable questions about whether anyone could have prevented the tragedy. It highlighted the inadequacy of mental health services and the dangers of untreated mental illness, combined with easy access to firearms. The Ruppert case influenced how law enforcement and mental health professionals approach family annihilation cases. Researchers studied James's background, looking for warning signs that might help prevent similar tragedies. His case appears in criminal psychology textbooks as an example of narcissistic rage turned homicidal. The case also contributed to ongoing debates about the insanity defense in American criminal law. James's 2 trials, with conflicting psychiatric testimony and struggling jurors, demonstrated how difficult it is to apply legal standards of insanity to complex mental health issues. Some legal scholars argue the case shows why the insanity defense should be reformed or eliminated. Others argue it demonstrates why mental health must be considered in criminal cases. The Easter Sunday Massacre remains the deadliest mass murder by a single person in Ohio history. It predates other infamous family annihilations and mass shootings, but shares common elements: a perpetrator who feels wronged, easy access to weapons, and a decision to solve perceived problems through violence. 49 years after the massacre, the case still resonates. True crime enthusiasts study it. Criminologists analyze it. The people of Hamilton remember it. And 11 graves serve as permanent reminders of what happens when resentment, mental illness, and violence converge with tragic consequences. James Urban Ruppert destroyed his family on Easter Sunday 1975. He eliminated the brother he envied, the mother he resented, and 8 innocent children who had done nothing except be born into Leonard's family. He solved none of his problems. He only created new ones for himself and inflicted immeasurable pain on everyone connected to his victims. He sits in prison today, an old man who will almost certainly die behind bars, having spent more years incarcerated than most of his victims lived. The Easter celebration he destroyed continues in millions of homes every year, families gathering to honor faith and spend time together, unaware how fragile those bonds can be when someone decides violence is the answer to their pain. The Easter Sunday Massacre stands as one of the most tragic examples of family violence in American history. 11 innocent people, a grandmother looking forward to hosting her family, parents who worked hard to provide for their children, and 8 young people with their entire lives ahead of them, gone in 5 minutes of rage-fueled violence. What makes this case particularly haunting is its preventability. James Ruppert showed warning signs for years: chronic unemployment, alcoholism, mounting resentment, obsession with firearms, increasingly erratic behavior. His family recognized he had problems, but never imagined he posed a lethal threat. Perhaps in 1975, society lacked the understanding of mass violence warning signs that we have today. Perhaps intervention could have prevented the tragedy. We'll never know. What we do know is that James's problems, whatever their root causes, didn't justify his actions. Millions of people struggle with mental illness, unemployment, family conflict, and personal disappointment without resorting to murder. James made a choice. He selected weapons, waited for his family to arrive, and methodically killed them all. Whatever sympathy his circumstances might generate evaporates in the face of what he did to 8 children who never harmed him. The victims deserve to be remembered. Charity, who opened her home to family gatherings and tried to help her troubled son. Leonard Jr. and Alma, who built a loving family and worked hard to give their children good lives. Leonard III, Michael, Thomas, Carol, Anne, David, Teresa, and John, 8 young people who never got to finish growing up, never experienced first loves, graduations, careers, families of their own. They were reduced to statistics in a mass murder, but they were real people with dreams, personalities, and potential. The community of Hamilton carries the weight of this tragedy decades later. The Easter Sunday Massacre changed how people viewed their town, their neighbors, and their safety. It served as a brutal reminder that violence can erupt anywhere, even in quiet neighborhoods on sacred holidays. James Urban Ruppert remains alive at 90, having survived all 11 of his victims by nearly half a century. He'll likely die in prison, an old man who destroyed his family and his own life in 5 minutes of violence. His legacy is one of pain, loss, and senseless brutality. The Easter Sunday Massacre reminds us why these stories matter. 11 people died, their families grieve, their community remembers, and every parole hearing, every true crime documentary, every retelling of their story ensures they're not forgotten. Justice may have been delayed by appeals and retrials, but ultimately, James Urban Ruppert was held accountable for his crimes. He'll spend his life in prison, denied the freedom he stole from 11 others. It's not enough. Nothing could be. But it's what the justice system can provide. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into cases that demand justice. The Ruppert family's story reminds us why these cases matter, why we must remember the victims, learn from tragedies, and work to prevent future violence. Drop a comment. What cold case or true crime story do you think deserves more attention? And share this video so the Ruppert family's story reaches others who need to hear it. The 11 victims of the Easter Sunday Massacre deserved better than the death they received. They deserved to live full lives, to celebrate many more Easters together, to grow old surrounded by people who loved them. James Urban Ruppert stole that future from them. The least we can do is remember their names and tell their story. Thank you for watching, and remember, justice may be delayed, but it should never be denied.